listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the third Doctor story, Carnival of Monsters. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
And Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the episode because we get some more of that wonderful listener feedback we like to get. And remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook at facebook.com/Secrets of Doctor Who. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN. And be sure to leave us comments wherever you find us. We love to hear from you. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you are certain to enjoy called The Secrets of Star Trek. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Star Trek. But today, of course, we're talking about Carnival of Monsters. And Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in this episode?
This week, we open on a planet that is just getting over space COVID and is beginning to ease the lockdowns, but they're still super skittish about letting germy aliens visit them. And we encounter a bunch of supercilious, officious, conniving bureaucrats running the customs office at Spaceport. Arriving at the spaceport are Vorg and Shurna, two human-looking aliens who are both interstellar carny trash. And they bring with them an entertainment device. Meanwhile, in their first adventure, now that the Doctor's exile on Earth has been lifted, the third Doctor and Joe Grant arrive on a ship in the Indian Ocean in 1926. But it seems everyone on the ship keeps reliving the last 10 minutes or so and can't form any long-term memories. Eventually, it's revealed that the 1926 ship is actually inside the entertainment device, which is known as a miniscope, a kind of zoo that shrinks large environments down to a small scale for the viewer's pleasure. Also inside the miniscope is another environment that is filled with drashigs, large, vicious, snake-like carnivores that are relentless hunters. The drashigs not only menace the Doctor and Joe, they also get loose in the inner workings of the miniscope. Outside the miniscope, one of the bureaucrats, Kalik, decides to allow the miniscope to fail and release the drashigs into the city. This will cause a crisis that will allow him to topple his brother, President Zarb, an unseen character, from power, and reintroduce harsh space COVID policies on the population again and squash their social problems. He may even start a war to unite the population. But first, the Doctor gets out of the miniscope and enlists Vorg and Shurna to help him link it to the TARDIS. That way, he can return all its inhabitants to their proper locations in space and time, and also rescue Joe. The Doctor goes back inside the miniscope to get Joe, and while he's in there, two drashigs get out and kill the conniving bureaucrat Kalik, before Vorg shoots them dead with an eradicator weapon. Eventually, all the 1926 humans and drashigs are returned to their proper places, the coup against the unseen character President Zarb is defeated, and the Doctor and Joe leave Vorg and Shurna on the planet to make a living using carny tricks like the shell game. The end.
Father Cory, overall impressions?
I kind of enjoyed it. I mean, it actually was a fairly tight plot all in all. I mean, there was still plenty of running around. I was going to say corridors, but actually running around electronic circuits,
crawling around
and running around. But no, it was like I said, fairly tight. I like the ideas behind the miniscope where you could have different environments and, miniaturized inside of it and things like that. And I think we see it again in Doctor Who eventually, or at least the idea of it. So no, I enjoyed this one. Of course, it's third Doctor. I always enjoy the third Doctor.
How about you, Jimmy?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It's got a script by Robert Holmes, and with one exception, those tend to be good. It's like other Holmes scripts. It's typically creative, cynical, and darkly comic. It plays with themes of bureaucracy and corruption and people conning each other and stuff like that. And so you have this interesting mix of the officious bureaucrats and also who Robert Holmes loves parodying or satirizing, and also the working man, trickster Vorg, who's carny trash. And that is a term of art for people who don't know. It's used by people in the carnival industry itself to refer to their own. So I'm not being offensive there, certainly not deliberately. I'm using their own term for them. They even have Vorg speak to the Doctor in Carney lingo, which is a developed form of slang that's almost like another language in at times. It has elements of Italian in it and other things, and we have multiple lines of authentic Carney lingo being directed at the Doctor because Vorg assumes the Doctor is also a showman, that he's also a carnival worker, and especially the way he's dressed. And so he starts speaking to him in this argot, and the Doctor is like, "I'm sorry, I don't understand."
So I'm in agreement, I guess, because I like this one too. I always enjoy the third Doctor's sort of, he sometimes has a little bit of a bluster to him and his lack of patience with people who are infuriating around him. So I really enjoyed that. This is another one of those, Jimmy, you and I talked about that Lower Decks episode recently in the I Have No Bones and I Must Flee, where it's another one of those menagerie. They bring up the fact that, humans kept getting caught up in menageries. And this is another one of those stories where human beings are caught up in some alien species menagerie. And that's what we have here. So I thought that was kind of interesting that we just talked about that. And it's a unique way of doing it. It's sort of it's almost like a flea circus in that sense, where they're tiny little, people performing, routines that are by the miniscope are causing them to loop, like you mentioned. And so I thought was interesting and creative. And there was so many different elements to this story, and it doesn't all, you don't get what all these things have to do with each other until you're kind of well into the story. It kind of develops it a bit.
At first watch, unless you know the premise, or unless you're really carefully watching and thinking, you're going to think that we're cutting between two different places.
Oh yeah,
we're watching the spaceport in one story, and then in a parallel narrative, the Doctor and Jo are arriving in 1926, and you're assuming somehow these are going to link up in the future. And the reveal is we've been watching the same place the whole time. They're inside the miniscope in the spaceport.
Right. Yep. Right. One of the things you mentioned was that Holmes likes to write about, bureaucrats and functionaries, but he's also got this whole class. He's really writing about different classes of people as well. So, we have these bureaucrats, and then something called functionaries, which are essentially a slave class, or almost like the
working class or something.
Yeah, almost like Dalits in India.
Well, they're kind of slave class, kind of almost, conscripted military type, because they also do the defense of the country, of the planet. They're the ones that are running the weaponry or so ever. So it would be similar to like India again, where the British military conscripted Indians to serve, but also to be the servants of the generals and so on. Right.
Exactly.
That works really well until you have a Sepoy rebellion.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you have on board the SS Bernice, the ship that the Dr. Jo ended up on. You also have this sort of upper crust British, father and daughter on their way to India, but by coincidence. They seem kind of out of touch, kind of clueless. It's this often, I think Robert Holmes especially, I don't know if other Doctor Who writers did this too, but kind of just portrayed them as sort of kind of clueless about what's really going on around them. And so I thought there was an interesting connection between these things. And even just the fact that the miniscope itself and these Carnival folk are have this underclass. They treat people as property, and so there's this theme going on throughout, which I thought was interesting. And how the Time Lords, as we hear from the Doctor, they set aside their famous neutrality for this instance to ban miniscopes because of how terrible they are and how they treat people like property.
And the Doctor reveals he was instrumental in having that legislation passed.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things that's interesting to me about this is, so everyone on this planet, all the natives, are gray. And so this is like a different kind of gray alien. And I think that I wonder if, and there's sort of two kinds. The functionaries have masks on them, and it's not clear, is that meant to be part of their anatomy, or is it meant to be a mask? Apparently it's the latter, because the bureaucrats also were going to be wearing masks in the original version of the script, but they decided to jettison those in order to get a better performance from the actors,
right.
So you can see their facial expressions. And basically they're all, they have gray grease paint on all over their heads and faces. They wear gray clothing, and they've all got male pattern baldness. With white silvery hair, and so their bald caps start slipping toward in the later episodes. But I wonder, since they're meant to be bureaucrats, if the selection of the color gray was deliberate, because you can think of, gray bureaucrats, these faceless, mindless, functionaries who are very officious and not acting like full people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, even a lot of it is arguments of, well, this tribunal is here for this purpose, but if we go any further, we have to go up the chain of the bureaucracy. And if you make any decision outside of this, you're violating. And, there's a lot of conversation about that of, things that are legitimate decisions to make. Oh, but you didn't have the permission to do that, so you should have never made that decision in the first place.
Right. Like all of this weird, following regulations and rules and referring to oneself in the third person as oneself.
Oh yeah, they use one as a pronoun constantly. One can, one must, one is aware of certain flaws. One has no desire to be devoured by alien monstrosities, even in the cause of political progress.
Yeah.
They basically say one whenever they mean I.
Yes. So the Lermans, the Carney folk, they refer to humans as Tellurians.
Mm-hmm.
Is that new in this story?
For Doctor Who, yes, but not for other things. That's Tellurian is a common adjective. It means, I shouldn't say common. It's a pre-existing adjective. It means related to the Earth. And in science fiction, it's often used or sometimes used as a reference to human beings as Tellurians.
Okay. So it was before Terran became the standard in all sci-fi, Tellurian was another option. Okay. I thought that I didn't know that. So I thought it was interesting. I don't know where that term came from. So
standard in sci-fi, except for Stargate, where they're the Tauri, but
the Tauri, yes, right. So as you mentioned, the Doctor's got the TARDIS working again. Like in the last story, we had him get the TARDIS repaired.
Working as the TARDIS works. Let's just put it that way.
Actually capable of making interplanetary runs, and so he's taking on a test run, and it's not going exactly well. And he
thinks he's on Metebelis 3, and
right.
That's a reference to a very significant planet we're going to go to in the future.
Yep.
And he keeps insisting they're on an alien planet, even though Joe is sitting there saying we're on a freighter on Earth, we're in an Earth ship. It says Singapore, there are chickens, and he just keeps insisting no. And I like the fact that at first we're just supposed to think, oh, this is just the Doctor being eccentric and sort of stubborn. But in fact, maybe his instinct is to know that they are actually not on Earth, and so it just his subconscious is influencing his conscious mind in that way. So I thought that was kind of an interesting subtlety that they put in there.
The Doctor has, and then this, I think this has been shown even in this show, at this point in the show, that the Doctor can kind of sense things about the planets that other people can't in time and space, and so he's aware that. Yes, this looks and smells and feels like Earth, but this isn't Earth for whatever reason. Right.
Although they do have the Doctor and Joe making some errors in this. Once they realize they're on a ship from 1926, the Doctor, Joe proposes, we've slipped back in time 40 years. And it's like, okay, that would mean this episode is occurring in 1966. which would have been inaccurate even at the date of filming, much less the unit dating controversy. It should be 50 or 60 years in the past. But then the ship is attacked, I guess, just for drama by a plesiosaur who plays no other role in the story. And and the doctor says, "Oh, that's impossible. It's been extinct for 130 million years." And it's like, no, try 66 million years.
right. The Great Extinction, the Great, and it is interesting because I'm thinking later on where it's explained that all of this in this particular, it's almost like Westworld where you have like this one scenario subdivided from others. This particular scenario is an Earth scenario or Tellurian scenario. So where the plesiosaur come from are we saying that?
Well, from Earth, just in the past.
Must be Nessie is real?
No, we already know about that. That's Fourth Doctor.
Yes, exactly. I agree. It was kind of like it was fun, but I wonder maybe this scenario was concocted by I keep want to call him Vigo, but that's or Virgo, but no, those are Vorg. I will remember. Vorg.
Well, we find out later, though, that he actually never set up the miniscope. He won it in gambling, and he doesn't actually know how to run it other than to just show whatever is going on in each channel.
That's true. So whoever set it up maybe grabbed the plesiosaur from a different era.
That's exactly what happened.
Speaking of the plesiosaur attack, we have the older English gentleman. I don't have the list of characters right in front of me. Let me go grab that.
Major Daly or
Major Daly,
Mr. Daly,
and his daughter, and the apparently first officer.
He is a major. Yeah, and his first officer, Harry Sullivan.
Yeah, exactly.
Or in this case, John Andrews, played by Harry Sullivan's actor Ian Marter. Yeah,
yep.
Which was but I saw it. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, so yet another naval officer, although he's not really a naval officer here. He's dressed like one, but he's just, this is the best dressed crew of like what looks like a tramp steamer, I have to say. But we get a clear idea that he's an officer aboard.
And once again, limited number of faces in the Doctor Who universe.
Yep.
Yes. And the Doctor and Joe get locked up in a cabin, and this is when the Doctor reveals that, this is the SS Bernice, and from his encyclopedic knowledge knows that she mysteriously vanished on June 4th, 1926, which is that very date.
Which is not a real thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, he compares it to other, to like the Mary Celeste, but and the Mary Celeste is a real ship, and there is a real mystery connected with the Mary Celeste. Mm-hmm. But although not that it vanished, its crew vanished. Mm-hmm. But this is not a real ship. Robert Holmes made this one up.
Well, then, of course, at the end they reverse it anyways.
Right.
That's by sending it back to the right time. So
the Doctor does change time. So apparently this was not I know it wasn't a thing yet, but not a fixed point in time for the.
Well, that's one interpretation. So when they send the way the calendar is on it's on Major. He is a major. It's on Major Daly's wall, mm-hmm. and he's crossed out the 1st, the 2nd, and the 3rd of June. And then when they send it back at the end, I'm like, well, wait. Then why was this ship listed as vanished? Why does the Doctor know this is a vanished ship if if they send it back? And we get a post-return sequence where Major Daly's daughter comes to visit him in bed as he's about to go to sleep, and after she leaves, he rolls over and crosses off the 4th. Now, if what he's doing is crossing off the days that have been completed, then you guys would be right. They changed Earth's history here. But if he's crossing off the days as he gets up to them, then they're about to experience the 4th in the morning. And so the Doctor didn't save them from disappearing. They're just going to disappear tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's likely he was crossing off the dates as they finished because he was crossing off as he was going to bed.
You're probably right, but
yeah.
I think that's
I
most
took it
likely.
a different way.
I think it's most likely because that's. I mean, I haven't known a lot of people who cross off dates on their calendars, but most people I know that do that, and pretty much everybody that I can think of that does that, they do it as the day finishes, not as the day starts. So I mean,
we don't need to belabor this point.
Yeah.
So
the one thing I wanted to say is I do like that Jo gets some stuff to do in this besides just follow the doctor around and ask questions and get in danger. I mean, she does all those things, of course, but they let her show her escapology skills because the doctor says the sonic screwdriver only works on electronic locks and they need something more primitive to get out of the cabin they're locked in. And she whips out her skeleton keys and gets them out. And later she does it for herself. Yep. And they don't even make a big deal out of the fact. We know she's an escapologist, but they don't even use that word in the episode. She just whips out the skeleton keys and goes to work.
Yep.
They also let her deduce some things before the doctor has figured them out, and then he'll agree with her, but they let her deduce things, which is nice. And she gets in a nice bit of quick thinking the first time they get discovered by Major Daly and his daughter. It's like, are you fellow passengers? Why haven't we seen you? And Jo intervenes and says, oh, my uncle, meaning the doctor, has been feeling poorly, so we've been in our cabin. And she's the one who comes up with a plausible relationship and explanation for why they're there.
Yeah. Although sometimes in the same story, they do write her as kind of dense too.
Oh, I know.
Like why she doesn't know why an air duct would be an important discovery for when they're running around inside the miniscope.
Instead of a major computer system, why do you need airflow? I don't know. And where does the air come from?
Right. Or why it would be important for them who are trying to escape. It's like
right. And later on she starts talking with Claire, and you can see that she's making the connection with Claire, that Claire's kind of going, wait a second, this all seems, she kind of just by, facial expression, Claire's like, we have done this before. This is familiar.
But it never bursts through into Claire's consciousness.
It gets close.
It gets close, especially in the post-return scene.
Yeah.
But this is a part of a general sequence. The writing... I mean, there's a certain, and I've talked about it, I even keep lists of cliches from this kind of radio television writing from several decades ago that is very non-realistic, and it involves tropes like, but you must believe me, you must, and not providing any evidence for why they should believe you. Mm-hmm. We, the audience, know that they're telling the truth, but the trope is they just say, but you must believe me, and also, we'll just have to take that chance. And, it's a calculated risk. And all these, it can be frustrating to me to encounter this kind of cliched dialogue. And they get Jo trapped in a loop of it later when she's alone back in the miniscope. The doctor is outside the miniscope and Jo is inside it, and she's interacting with the humans. And she just over and over and over cannot believe that they don't remember. And right. It's like, Jo, it's already been established. Let's move on from this.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and then there's speaking of another Jo thing, was at one point early on when they've discovered that they're inside a miniscope and, the people have been, she just wants to go. She just wants to leave them there. Like the people, like these people, she says, let's just find the TARDIS and get out of here and leave this all behind. And it seems, I mean, I could guess she's under stress or whatever, but it seems very much lacking in compassion, which doesn't seem like something Jo, as the characters that's been established so far, would be. So I thought that was odd.
Admittedly, she's in a completely new situation.
Mm-hmm.
Now she's not used to traveling with the doctor in this way.
Yeah. So the one of the things that these gray aliens from Minorians, whatever you want to call them, I'll just keep calling them the gray aliens.
Just call them interiors.
The interiors.
Well, that even sounds like a bureaucratic name.
Yeah, yeah, and. They do mention at some point when Vorg and his assistant, they mention that they're carnies. oh yes, we have banned entertainment on this planet, and you're like, you know what? That's just as more grayness in this gray planet.
They're talking about how it may be lifted now that the space COVID, now that everybody's gotten over space COVID, and it's like, okay, yeah, our government kind of did the same thing. They sort of banned amusement during COVID.
They did. So, one of the interesting aspects of the miniscope is that Vorg can manipulate emotions, and he can make the members, the people inside, more violent at the turn of a knob. And that's when we get the Doctor boxing Queensberry rules against
Harry Sullivan pops him in the nose.
They get some pretty good shots on each other, but no Venusian Aikido, just boxing straight up.
There is another bit that I like, just on a it's metatextually funny, but when one of the Drashigs break, and by the way, Drashig is an anagram of dish rag, and they Robert Holmes did that because what they would do to give the actors something to react to show them where the Drashig is supposed to be, and then they put the Drashigs in post-production, is they would hang a dish rag on a stick. And it's like, this is where the Drashig is, so react to the dish rag. And so that's how we got Drashigs. But when the Drashigs get onto the 1926 ship, completely banishing the plesiosaur from the plot, the guns they have, they try to use guns, and the guns seem to have a little bit of an effect. I mean, it's hard to tell, but they seem to. Also, Major Daly gets a Tommy gun, so he's just machine gunning a Drashig, which is really cool to see in a Doctor Who episode. But ultimately, what they need to do to deal with the Drashigs is use dynamite. And so Harry Sullivan, I'm just going to call him that because it's fun, gets dynamite and is throwing the dynamite, and the Doctor is like, no, you'll kill us all, and he's thrown the dynamite anyway, and that's what breaks the miniscope. And it's Harry Sullivan throwing explosives. So this is just another instance of Harry Sullivan is careless about explosives. Harry Sullivan is an imbecile.
You know, the whole thing with the Drashigs, Holmes makes this big deal about how invulnerable they are. Like, oh, 50 fully armed space future soldiers landed on this planet, and none of them survived from one Drashig.
Not even the ship. Not even the ship.
The ship was eaten. And yet a bunch of sailors in 1926 can fight them off with, ancient guns and dynamite.
And even the gray aliens at one point are talking amongst themselves when Vorg isn't around. One of them is very afraid of the Drashigs, and the other one is saying, he's exaggerating.
Right.
Which is what a carny showman is going to do.
I guess, yeah. I do like the fact that the one who said, when it comes out, we'll just, run away in the crowd. We'll be fine. He's the one who ends up getting eaten. Because
of course.
That was... So at one point, when we're looking on the miniscope, there, we're seeing the different areas. We do actually see a Cyberman on screen.
And an Ogron.
Right.
Yep.
So there's... I thought that meant this was a Cyberman episode, but apparently not. Just Cyberman.
They just dress a guy up in a Cyberman mask to look around the camera.
Yeah. So there are other environments in there. We only get to visit two of them, though: 1926 Earth and the Drashig planet.
Yeah, where in that one, the Doctor is able to fight off Drashigs with flammable swamp gas, which is interesting. So. Yeah, and then we have, as you mentioned, this whole subplot of these two bureaucrats, the brother of the president, one of them trying to have a coup and overthrow his brother with a disaster that would kill a lot of people. I mean, that's one of the things that they're hoping for. I mean, it's very cold-blooded, very...
Well, and that's typical of how Robert Holmes likes to portray bureaucrats, but, as self-serving, conniving, and unconcerned about others. But this plot, and it's weird that we don't even get to see the president. they talk about him, but we never get to see him. And he's even the brother of this Kalik guy. Well, it turns out this subplot was added pretty late. And the reason was that that there wasn't a clear villain otherwise, and there was a perceived lack of menace and conflict on a broader scale than, we're having an industrial accident at a spaceport.
Right.
And so they created that to add some intrigue, but it was a late addition, which is apparently part of why we never even see the character that they're trying to topple, which is normally something you'd want to do.
Right.
We hear about him and we hear about his policies and his actions, but we never even see him. One thing that we probably should mention is, so the miniscope has a compression field, and if you get out of the miniscope and stay outside of it for more than a couple of seconds, you start expanding. And so that's how the at one point Vorg is reaching in and he pulls out the TARDIS and then he puts it back in, but later the TARDIS gets out another way and it grows back to normal size. And then when the Doctor gets out after escaping a Drashig, he falls over and then he expands back to normal size. Right. And so when a couple of Drashigs get out, they expand, and that's really Kalik's plan. Is I don't think he knows it's Harry Sullivan. He just knows it's failing. But after Harry Sullivan blows up the inner workings of the miniscope, it's starting to fail. It's only got a certain amount of power, and then its compression field is going to shut off, and the Drashigs are going to expand. There's going to be 20 of them. That's apparently the size of a Drashig colony, and they're going to run rampant in the city. So that's what Kalik's plan is to just let it fail, and then the Drashigs will re-expand and kill people in the city and let him topple his brother.
Like I said, cold-blooded. It was kind of amusing to see teeny tiny Doctor wandering around on the kind of stumbling around out of the miniscope. And then once this whole everything that happens on Inter Minor basically happens in a customs quarantine area where these bureaucrats are trying to eradicate everything. They're trying to eradicate the miniscope and deport Vorgan. Shurna, Vorgan, Shurna, and then they want to eradicate the Doctor, and they want to blast everything. They're just very
they're California scared. COVID officials.
That's right. and so all that happens here. But one of the fun things was, once the Doctor's out of the miniscope, they want to question him, but he has this audacious questioning of them. As they're deliberating over whether to eradicate him as a health menace, he's interrogating them about this miniscope, which I thought was a fun turn on the tables, because as usual, the Doctor just basically overrides everybody and just runs over them.
And that's what convinces Vorg that the Doctor must be a fellow Carnival worker, that he's got the audacity to just take this inquiry that's directed against him and turn it around against the people that are conducting it.
And one of the things that infuriates the Doctor is when Vorg refers to everything inside the miniscope, all the people, as his livestock. And the Doctor rightfully indignant at such a way of referring to people.
That's not my favorite moment of that kind of thing on Doctor Who, though. My favorite moment is in A Christmas Carol, where we're in the older Kazran Sardik's house, and he's got, I forget her name, the woman frozen in a block of ice. And the 11th Doctor says, "Oh, who is that?" And Kazran Sardik says, "Oh, nobody important." And the Doctor kind of cocks his head and says, "Funny, 900 years traveling space and time, and I've never met anyone who wasn't important."
Yes, that was really good. Yeah. And what's one of the characteristics of the Doctor over all of the incarnations is he cares about everyone, and every person is important, except sometimes when they're not. But
except sometimes when they're not, or except sometimes when you're the 6th Doctor, or except all the time when you're the Valeyard.
Right. So, and then things go crazy. Drashig escape. we have to. Vorg comes to the rescue. He's actually kind of a hero. He's a veteran who has from the what is it? The 7th Laser Regiment. I think it was
17th Heavy Laser. Yep.
17th Heavy Laser, and he happens to have the right part to make Eradicator work.
This is nicely done because the gray alien bureaucrats they've got this Eradicator, which is basically it's like a laser machine gun. And the functionaries are there to use it, but there's a rule that you can't leave one unattended because it might blow up. And so it needs constant monitoring, but they need to get the functionaries out of the way so they won't witness part of the plot to overthrow President Zarb. And so the nervous bureaucrat is like, but we need constant monitoring for the machine. And so Kalix says, well, then you'll make sure it won't explode, won't you? And he gets a part. And so the nervous guy gets a part out of it. And that will keep it from functioning and also from exploding. Mm-hmm. And so then he's hanging on to this part, and their third colleague gets back from checking on some stuff. And it's like, what do I do if he tries to inspect the Eradicator? He'll learn about it's not working. That's going to lead to the discovery of the missing part. That's going to lead to us being accused of sabotage. And so Kalix says, just put it in the bag. Just put it in Vorg's luggage. And then if anything goes wrong, we'll conveniently discover it and he'll get the blame. And so the scaredy guy goes and puts, I think his name is Orem. He puts the part in one of Vorg's bags. And then a little bit later, Shurna comes up to Vorg and says, hey, what's this thing? I found it in your bag. And it's the part from the Eradicator. Mm-hmm. And so that starts him reminiscing about his days with the 17th Heavy Laser Brigade or whatever. And he sticks it in his pocket. And so then when the Drashigs break out, and have expanded and have just killed Kalix, Vorg, as a former laser artillery guy, goes to the Eradicator, tries to use it, sees it's not working, realizes I've got a part that it needs in my pocket. He pulls it out, sticks it in, and kills the two Drashigs. So the reason Kalix dies is because he had his buddy sabotage the weapon. So Kalix couldn't defend him in time. And we have this nice little circuitous route for this little part subplot that ends up reconnecting and explaining stuff in the story. I
forgot that they had planted that on him. I watched it 2 different times. Yeah.
They wanted to blame him for doing the sabotage in the first place.
Right.
Because as another excuse to basically, execute these aliens instead of just merely kicking them back off the planet.
Right. So, all's well that ends well. We end with the Doctor and Joe getting into the TARDIS to return or to go wherever their next adventure takes them. And Vorg is doing the old shell game with Pietrak, I think his name is.
Pietrak.
Yes, Pietrak, who is like a lot of people from Interminer is very gullible, and so he's like, I'm going to like it here,
and interested in gambling now.
Yeah, right, right.
He's a good mark.
This is a great place for the carnies like Vorg and Shurna to show up, and that's where we end this story. So, any final thoughts, Father Cory?
So I get a kick how Vorg's got supposedly a micrograph, basically a document from President Zarb. Of course, it was fraudulent. First of all, it was something that he got from some guy that at the last planet they were at. But he holds up this very high-tech device, a cassette tape.
Yeah, it's just a cassette tape.
Literally, it was a black-cased cassette tape that they used as this micrograph.
But did he have a pencil to wind it up? I mean,
yeah, exactly. And if you know what that is, you're Gen X and earlier.
Exactly. I guess in 1970, 3, 4, whatever this was, the cassette tapes were advanced in high tech. So yeah.
Yep. And then I get a kick there's just one little line about how the power source was like from the Eternity Perpetual Company. It was a perpetual power source. And of course, they went bankrupt because everybody had these perpetual power sources that didn't need new ones, and they never broke.
There's no planned obsolescence in this company.
They should learn something from American appliance manufacturers. Jimmy, how about you? Anything else?
So speaking of some limitations of the practical effects at the time, or the props at the time, I like when the shuttle has just arrived at customs, they have the functionaries unloading a bunch of crates from it, but the crates look exactly like Christmas presents. They're clearly lightweight cardboard boxes that have been wrapped in silvery Christmas wrapping. And
yes,
and
Santa's workshop
with a string tied around them, and so it's like, okay, these are Santa's elves are scary now.
Yeah, exactly.
There's also a bit at the end where they're playing the shell game. They are doing it on, it's like a pipe that's sticking up out of the ground, and there's a lid for the pipe, and Vorg is using the lid to put the shells on. And of course they give them space names. You know, this is a something or other shell, and we've got this something or other P, and we're going to play the shell game. And although they don't even call it that, they've got another name for it. But we get this extended close-up of the lid on this pipe where they're playing the game, and it has clearly been cut out of cardboard.
Yeah.
You know, you can see it's just like they cut out cardboard and spray painted it. Then you can see the corrugation weave on the inside of the cardboard. So, you know, they were clearly either for budgetary or time, or didn't think anyone would notice, or for some reason they just went with spray painted cardboard for the lid. Didn't even bother taking a piece of, you know, of composite wood and cutting a circle out of that and painting it.
Yeah.
Well, you know, TVs will never show, you know, high definition. You know, it'll always be fuzzy and small. So
Black
it'll
and
work.
white. Yeah.
Black and
So you mentioned the ball caps kind of get it coming loose near the end. There's also the other thing was the grease paint. You could see on some of the characters, it was not very well done around the eyes and around the lips, and so like you saw this pink skin coming through pretty clearly. So it was they took some shortcuts on the stuff.
I wanted to mention one other thing, which was neat, that anticipates something later in Doctor Who. So when they're in the miniscope on the 1926 ship, the Doctor finds these this plate in the floor, and they turn to Harry Sullivan and they say, "What's that?" Because it looks out of place. And they say, "Oh, this metal doesn't even exist." The Doctor later tells Joe this metal doesn't even exist on Earth. And it's like, okay, basically almost all metals are silver. You know, you look at pictures of what's on the periodic table, almost all the metals are just different shades of silver, with few exceptions like gold. And so you really couldn't identify this metal. I mean, if it were purple or something, you could say that's not an earth metal, but it's not. It's just silver. But what's interesting is Harry Sullivan says, "What are you talking about?" And he doesn't see it. And the Doctor later tells Joe it's been blocked from his consciousness. And so this is anticipating an idea that will become prominent later in Doctor Who, which is a perception filter.
Yep.
So Harry Sullivan and the other 1926 humans are walking around with perception filters interfering with their ability to recognize things, whereas the Doctor and Joe are not subject. They're not under the mental effects of the miniscope in the same way. And so they have an unobstructed perception of this hatch that none of the 1926 people can perceive and investigate. Right.
I like how in this time period the Doctor has multiple tools. He doesn't have just one. You know, the sonic. He had to go get another tool to release that hatch and that sort of thing. So that was it makes for a little more drama and plot.
It does, and so we've established two limitations on this model of the sonic screwdriver. It doesn't do mechanical locks, and it doesn't do this kind of some kind of magnetic lock. So it's like, not much good, is it? There's only apparently a few kinds of locks it's going to work on.
That's right.
You can see why the Doctor upgraded it.
Yes, that's true. So that does it for our discussion of Carnival of Monsters. Let's get to our feedback. And our first feedback comes from an older episode. This one goes back a bit from our episode 305, our 13th Doctor retrospective. And Daniel Martinez on Twitter writes, I get the feeling that Chibnall was going for something like an extreme version of the Fifth Doctor, someone more human, vulnerable, and maybe prone to nervousness and worry about what others might think of her. But if so, then it really doesn't get called out as much as it should have. Eric Sayward gave the Fifth Doctor stories like Earthshock and Resurrection of the Daleks, which really exposed just how helpless the Doctor can be at times and impacts the people around him. And Companion even leaves out of being tired of the Doctor not being able to save more people from their deaths and having all this death and destruction around her. If the 13th Doctor had more of that, then I think we'd be getting somewhere better. For as problematic as Eric Sayward was with John Nathan Turner, he still really had this willingness to challenge characters, even the Doctor himself. Makes me more appreciative of material like Resurrection of the Daleks, and likewise, makes me wish that the 13th Doctor got more material that actually challenged her character more and brought more sides to her character out in other mediums.
Yeah, this is really unfortunate. I agree that Chibnall I think he was trying to do something like a combination of the second and the fifth Doctors for the 13th. And I don't think it worked at all. Job number one for Jodie Whittaker's Doctor was to be likable. And in the beginning she was. She was a fairly pleasant, interesting, likable. But as things went on, she got preachy and secretive and just non-heroic and a harpy. She was lecturing people and she became shrill and there was too much tell and don't show about how awesome everyone, especially Yaz, is. And we didn't get to see her character challenged the way Peter Davison's character was challenged. Now, you can't always be killing companions, and the death of Adric is, one of Peter Davison at his most vulnerable. He's also very vulnerable in the Caves of Androzani, which you also can't do all the time because that's his resurrection story, his regeneration story. But he was vulnerable in other things. I mean, right out the gate in Castrovalva, he's like, this regeneration may fail, and I have to have my companions put me in the zero room to enable just to survive this regeneration. And so he did get challenged as a character in ways Jodie Whittaker just never did. She got put in dramatic situations, and then she would arrogantly bluster her way through them. And so she switched between being insecure and vulnerable to being arrogant and lecturing and also secretive and not sharing things with her companions to the point that even the companions would confront her. So, they could have killed a companion. Sure. That would, just for dramatic reasons. Preferably either Ryan or Yaz. Yeah. And that would have, let the Doctor show some vulnerability. And especially if they only killed one of them. I mean, now they had, when Adric was killed, they had negative reaction on the backside of that from Tegan and Nyssa. But today, imagine how, they got over it fairly quickly. Where then they really remember Adric occasionally, but there wasn't any long-standing trauma. Right. But suppose that, you've got Graham, Yaz, and Ryan, and either Yaz or Ryan dies. Okay, if it's Ryan, Graham is now going to have big issues with my wife died under your watch, and now my grandson is dead. Ooh, that would be some nice, interesting character drama of can we keep this relationship, this time travel relationship going under those circumstances? How is that going to work? We could see a very interesting side of Jodie Whittaker's character. Or if it's Yaz, that dies. Then Ryan is a contemporary of Yaz, and he and Graham both could have very questioning reactions of, do we want to continue traveling with you, Doctor? And that would have allowed both of their characters to grow. So actually, I think putting the 13th Doctor in a Peter Davison-like situation and losing a companion could significantly have helped the arc of the show at that point.
Mm. And Daniel's message implies he'd like to see that perhaps in other medium. So I think maybe like in Big Finish, if we ever get 13th Doctor Big Finish stories, maybe that would be a way to, just like we fixed a lot about the 6th Doctor with Big Finish.
And that could be a possibility. I don't know if I would be personally interested in it. I think I don't know. I suppose, back in the 90s after Doctor Who went on hiatus and, everybody's thinking about the 6th Doctor, they were like, I really don't want to hear any more from this guy. They blew it with that character. And I think there's a lot of fans, and I'll count myself as one of them, that think, no, I think they blew it with this character. They could have done so much better with this character. Instead, like Jimmy said, they got preachy with it. They got obnoxious with the character. And I think if they had made it a more vulnerable incarnation of the Doctor, it would have been something I would want to hear more. I would be afraid, could Big Finish do their magic on this character? Would they be bound up by what's already been set with this character and just decide we need to continue with it in that vein? I don't know. I would if they could do it well, then I would be interested. And there's no reason, again, with their record, that they won't. But right now, color me not interested in hearing what they have to do with it.
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, if they do it and they do it well, okay, I'll be interested. But as of right now, that would be one of the few Big Finish projects I'm not really waiting for.
Yeah,
I want my Dr. Ruth boxed sets. Those are already been announced.
Yeah.
Yes, I can't wait for that.
Do they even recognize these problems with the 13th Doctor? That's the
well, and it would be, which companion would they be able to get or choose to get to be with her? Because I'll be honest, if it's Yaz, I'm not interested.
Yeah,
maybe Dan, maybe Graham. I would go.
Graham would be awesome.
Yeah,
Dan would be good. I liked Dan.
Yeah.
And they can always have the Doctor temporarily separated from companions and get new ones, which they've done with other Doctors.
Or hang out with River. That would be interesting. Or Missy. So our next feedback comes from our most recent episode that folks may have, well, never mind, from a recent episode, Mission to the Unknown, which was a First Doctor story. And this comes from
Without the First Doctor.
Right. Mark on YouTube wrote, Terry Nation did eventually succeed with some of the concepts from this episode. Blake 7 was bleak, depressing, and killed off most of its characters. That's what I'm not familiar with, but yeah.
Oh yeah, Blake 7 is, so it's set in a dystopian future, and there's this guy named Raj Blake. I'm blanking on the actor's name, although it's on the tip of my brain. And he gets roped into a political underground that's trying to fight the power. And they have a ship called the Liberator, and they fly around and try to liberate things. And he vanishes halfway through. The main character that's named after, he's got, Blake and his 7. He's the Blake, and he vanishes halfway through. And his sort of slimy second in command, Avon, takes over. And Avon is a great character. Avon is really great. He's very cynical. And we have an early pre-Doctor Who appearance of Colin Baker in this as Babin the Butcher, where he's like a homicidal galactic mass murderer who also is a mama's boy. And he's just as blustery in this role as he is as Doctor Who, only it works because he's a murderer. Yeah. But then in the series finale, they bring back the actor playing Raj Blake, and he came back on the condition they would kill him. And so the series ends with Raj and most of the rest of the crew being killed. But not all of them. And Big Finish has continued the adventures of Blake Seven, and they brought back the original cast for the surviving characters, including Avon. And I haven't listened to those, but I imagine, knowing Avon and knowing how Big Finish writes, I expect they would be well worth watching for any or listening to for any Blake Seven fan.
Fun.
Yeah.
The actor you're trying to remember is Gareth Thomas.
Gareth Thomas, yeah.
There's a lot of crossover, of course, not a shock, Britain is a small island, but a lot of crossover with Doctor Who actors, Yep,
mm-hmm. as usual. As usual.
Oh, yeah, we saw Avon in the Sixth Doctor story. Is it Time Lash?
It might be, I can't remember.
It was definitely a Sixth Doctor story, where it was on an alien planet with a bunch of conniving people, and one of them was the actor who played Avon.
Mm-hmm. Paul Darrow is the actor.
Yeah.
And he was in, I'm just trying to think, TV and Doctor Who. I'm trying to do this quick on Wikipedia.
People can look it up online to find out the connections.
Captain Hawkins in Doctor Who and the Silurians.
Nope.
And Tecker in Time Lash. He was in both.
Time Lash, yeah.
Yep. Tecker in Time Lash. Gotta look it up because All right, so that's our feedback. Thank you both.
Well, if we don't look it up, other people will, and then they'll write in, and then we'll need to do their feedback. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
We're
that's good. We need to leave things for the audience to help us with. So
tell us in the comments.
There you go. All right, so that does it for this time. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Chris M., Paul S., Brian L., Robert W., and Daniel P. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Zyman Yannick, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. We'd love to hear what you thought of Carnival of Monsters. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. And you can watch the Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you can comment and make sure you like and subscribe. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the 12th Doctor story, Face the Raven. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Tom.
Father Cory Sticha, thank you as well.
Thank you, Don.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest, and remember, the Tribunal is not deliberating, it's arguing.